Breaking: President Trump just dropped a huge bomb on John Kerry. Following reports over the weekend that former President Barack Obama's Secretary of State, John Kerry, and a group of very sycophantic State Department officials, had been busy being unofficial diplomats in recent weeks. Flitting off and sneaking around the world, wheeling and dealing, in a last-ditch attempt to salvage the Iran nuclear deal he presided over. This comes just ahead of its May 12 renewal deadline, and unsurprisingly it appears that President Donald Trump has quite a bit to say about these actions. As is his norm, President Trump took to Twitter to publicly call Kerry out for conducting illegal shadow diplomacy with Iran, violating the Logan Act. Many recall that the Logan Act was used as a means to question Michael Flynn. Then how can the American people not demand the same level of accountability with the same sort of DOJ/F.B.I. investigation against John Kerry? President Trump tweeted, "The United States does not need John Kerry's possibly illegal shadow diplomacy on the very badly negotiated Iran deal. He was the one that created this mess in the first place." The Boston Globe reported the details of Kerry's shadow treachery. Diplomacy via bostonglobe.com. John Kerry's bid to save one of his most significant accomplishments as Secretary of State took him to New York on a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks ago, where, more than a year after he left office, he engaged in some unusual shadow diplomacy with a top-ranking Iranian official. He sat down at the United Nations with Foreign Minister Javad Zarif to discuss ways of preserving the pact limiting Iran's nuclear weapons program. It was the second time in about 2 months that the two had met to strategize over salvaging a deal they spent years negotiating during the Obama administration, according to a person briefed on the meetings. With the Iran deal facing its gravest threat since it was signed in 2015, Kerry has been on an aggressive yet stealthy mission to preserve it, using his deep lists of contacts gleaned during his time as the top U.S. diplomat to try to apply pressure on the Trump administration from the outside. President Trump, who has consistently criticized the pact and campaigned in 2016 on scuttling it, faces a May 12 deadline to decide whether to continue abiding by its terms. Kerry also met last month with German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, and he's been on the phone with top European Union official Federica Mogherini, according to the source, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to reveal the private meetings. Kerry has also met with French President Emmanuel Macron in both Paris and New York, conversing over the details of sanctions and regional nuclear threats in both French and English. The rare moves by a former Secretary of State highlight the stakes for Kerry personally, as well as for other Obama-era diplomats who are dismayed by what they see as Trump's disruptive approach to diplomacy, and who view the Iran nuclear deal as a factor for stability in the Middle East and for global nuclear non-proliferation. The pact, which came after a marathon negotiating session in Vienna that involved Iran and 6 world powers, lifted sanctions in return for Iran stopping its pursuit of nuclear weapons. It is unusual for a former Secretary of State to engage in foreign policy like this, as an actual diplomat and quasi-negotiator, said Michael O'Hanlon, a foreign policy expert at the Brookings Institution. Of course, former Secretaries of State often remain quite engaged with foreign leaders, as they should, but it's rarely so issue-specific, especially when they have just left office. Kerry declined to be interviewed for this story. The quiet lobbying campaign, by him and others, is being conducted below the radar because he and his allies believe a high-profile defense of the deal by prominent Democrats would only backfire and provoke Trump, making it more likely the president would pull the United States out of the deal. Zero Hedge reports stash. With less than a week to go until Donald Trump withdraws from the Iran nuclear deal on May 12, absent some last-minute diplomatic miracle, the recent discovery of John Kerry's covert involvement to preserve the deal will only cement Trump's resolve to abandon Obama's signature foreign diplomatic treaty. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani warned the U.S. of historic regret if it pulls out from the nuclear deal. If the United States leaves the JCPOA, you will soon see the historic regret which the move will bring about for Washington, Rouhani told a crowd in Sabzvar in northeast Tehran. Under the deal, technically known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, signed in 2015, the US and other world powers agreed to lift some of the economic sanctions imposed on Iran in return for the latter agreeing to rein in its nuclear program. The biggest impact, however, was lowering the price of crude, as the global market suddenly had access to nearly 1 million in Iranian oil output, and one of the key reasons why the price of oil has spiked in recent weeks is the market's growing confidence that Trump will dump the JCPOA. Whereas Trump has called the pact one of the worst negotiated agreements he has ever seen, and has repeatedly threatened to pull the US out of the deal and has to make a decision on whether he will do so by May 12 deadline, Rouhani said Iran has been loyal to its promises. But it is explicitly telling the whole world, Europe, America, the West and the East, that we will not talk about our country's weapons and defense with anyone. We will build and store any amount of weapons and missiles needed by the country. It is none of anybody's business what decision the Iranian people have made for their defense. We will not talk about the precision of missiles and defensive power with anyone, Rouhani said.